Greetings, guys, gals, non-binary pals. Welcome back to the Amazing Plant Project. My name's Rin, and today is the inaugural episode of the Botany Book Club book reviews. If you hang out over on Twitch at all, ever, we've been going through Thus Spoke the Plant as a book club discussion topic, shall we say. The next couple of weeks, at least, we're going to be going through braiding sweetgrass. So, if that's a thing that you would like to participate in, I'll have all of the links and whatnot down below, but it's twitch.tv/adventurin. So, for today's video, first off, we've got The Bad Seed. Now, I don't have it physically. I ended up borrowing a library copy of an audiobook. It's through Cloud Library, if that helps at all. So, there's been a wardrobe change. I recorded this yesterday, and then when I was editing it, discovered that the entire first book was not included. So, we're redoing that right now. There we go. So, we've got the first book in the lineup is The Bad Seed. Now, The Bad Seed is written by Jory John and illustrated by Pete Oswald. It's a children's story geared at kind of a 4 to 8 age range or a preschool reading level, and is designated as children's fiction. The story explores themes of isolation, pain, and how it can kind of fester and cause additional damage far and above what the initial pain was, both to the individual themselves and those around them. There's also a surface level depiction of the sunflower's life cycle, showing the seeds growing on the sunflower head and then being harvested. And just a trigger warning for discussion of trauma relating to childhood issues in context of the seed and things, and how it relates to human experience. So I will put a timestamp on the screen somewhere and in the description for after that discussion point. So our sunflower seed main character, who you can see up there with a crayon, starts out happy, full of joy and hope, just hanging out with the family on the sunflower head. And as a result of pain and abandonment, they become angry and reserved, lashing out whenever the other characters interact with them. They've been hurt, and in responding to that pain, others only see their antagonistic behavior. They're called a bad seed because that's what they are perceived to be. If it's said often enough and vehemently enough, a person starts to believe it, to internalize it. It's okay to not be okay all of the time. It doesn't mean that you're bad. Having traumas that you need to work through doesn't make you a bad person, regardless of what media, film, books, and the like, and wider society would argue. Therapy is often a rather helpful tool for folks, especially in situations like that. Also, acknowledging that you have things to work through does not negate any progress or personal goals, advancement, etc. that you have already achieved. Life's a journey. Sometimes it takes people a bit to find their footing, especially after some kind of traumatic situation. And that's okay too. Having a strong, supportive community tends to help in situations like that. That being said, there are several issues with the text itself. While the ending is positive, it at once A, depicts a situation where a happy ending is almost a given after having gone through some kind of trauma. B, it says that when you're in the middle of processing things, you can just decide to be better, though they do acknowledge that that is often a long process. And C, it continually reinforces the idea that the main character is a bad seed, till eventually they're not so bad anymore at the end, even though they were never bad to begin with. They were just hurting and afraid. I haven't read any of the other books in the series. I believe there's 4 as of now, but remembered reading through this one several years ago and rather liked it. After doing more research about psychology in the interim, the narrative hits a bit different. Overall, I would give this 5 stars for the cute illustrations, but 3 stars overall for the actual content. And back to pasturing. Alright. Next we've got A Seed is Sleepy, which admittedly is my favorite of the 3 that we're going through today. And you can see the cover art, and unlike some books that the cover is kind of vastly different from the inside, it's the same level of detail in the illustrations all throughout. And if you look, where is it? All the plants in the text are labeled, so we've got the botanical illustration, and then it's labeled with Texas Mountain Laurel Pod, and that's how the entire book is set up. And they're all very detailed. Now, for A Seed is Sleepy, it's written by Diana Hutz Aston and illustrated by Sylvia Long. And I found, if anyone doesn't have access to this, I found a really good read through on YouTube, so I'll link it down below. Its target demographic is children aged 5 to 8, or a kindergarten reading level, and is designated as children's nonfiction. The book goes through different types of seeds and gives examples of each. Unlike some children's books, the illustrations in this are photorealistic botanical watercolor paintings, and each of the illustrations is individually labeled with the plant's common name. Now, there's no scientific names in here unless the common name and the scientific name are the same, but just something to keep in mind. And that helps to promote an easier association between the name and the plant it corresponds to. This operates as a good environmental science primer for children, or really anyone who's not already familiar with the subject. Topics ranging from ancient seed sprouting after being discovered by archaeologists to seed distribution and growth patterns are approached in a simple, direct way that makes them easily understandable and accessible. Furthermore, examples are given from plants from around the world, showing a whole compendium of different seeds from a myriad of different ecosystems. Also, I really appreciate the growth chart partway through the book that compares plant growth between different species. So we've got this. So we've got something that's short growing times, like the bean up here, that seed to fruits is 5 weeks. And then we've got, who are you? Teak. And then we've got teak that starts at the same point, has notable growth points, but isn't a fully mature plant until like 100 years later over here. And then also it's got the diagram for the bean. Also, when it's talking about redwoods, there's a depiction showing just how large the tree is compared to a human down there. The narrative also subtly addresses the fact that every seed is unique, more suited to certain things, certain environments, and dispersal methods, and all are valuable, all are important. Some have a few more hurdles to jump through before they can germinate, and others grow very quickly, and that's okay. Each seed grows and develops at its own pace and in its own way. Overall, I would give this 5 stars for information and illustrations presented in an accessible, direct way, and possibly take a bit off for the interesting formatting choices. As much as I really love this book, and it is consistent in what they decided to do, which I appreciate, and I'll get to that in a few weeks when we talk about Thus Spoke the Plant over here. But unless you've seen someone read the text previously, or you've gone through it a few times, it can be a bit tricky to know which parts to read in what order. And that seems to be the only real issue that I've found when I checked what folks were saying on Goodreads about it as well. So, like here, we've got the main title here, up top. A seed is inventive. And then it goes back over to here, and then carries on. So, it's not a deal breaker. It's not that hard to figure it out, but it's a thing. Also, if cursive or longhand writing is a challenge for you, this one might be a bit of an issue because aside from the plant names, all the text is in that kind of font. So, also something to keep in mind. Now, a short break and a message from our sponsor, water, because water is life, but also sometimes not if you get too much, which we'll visit in the next book. The third and final one for today, we've got We Are the Gardeners by Joanna Gaines and Kids, and illustrated by Juliana Sweeney. The target demographic is for children aged 4 to 8, or 1st to 2nd grade reading level, and is designated as children's nonfiction. So the story details the beginnings of the garden from the perspective of the author's children, starting with a humble fern and growing from there. Essentially, they get the fern, they overwater the fern, realize that certain plants have particular needs, and then start learning about plants and ecosystems and whatnot. There's a running theme of not giving up at the first sign of trouble. Sometimes, frustrating though it is, you fail at doing something. However, as in the sciences, failures show you how not to do something, so you have a higher rate of success in the future. If animals get into your garden, for example, you can take steps to fence off the area so that doesn't happen again, protecting both the plants and the animals involved. There's some plants that are highly poisonous or generally toxic to local animals. That's also something to take into account when planning to plant a garden. That being said, this book very much feels like the narrative told by a family privileged enough to have ready access to plantable land, funds to purchase tools, seeds and soils, and time to dedicate to taking care of the space. While that's not necessarily bad, it does paint a sometimes unrealistic picture of a family deciding on what seems like a whim to plant a garden. I will say, however, that there is some valuable information in this book discussing ecology and biological diversity in the ecosystem. In the ecosystem the garden happens to exist within. Unfortunately, it's still divided into the good, precious plants and the evil, resource stealing weeds, which is a whole discussion that we can get into at a later date. Likewise, while animals do essentially demolish the garden, often when animals are seen in a garden space eating things humans have planted, it's because A, there's a limited food supply in their general habitat and the plants they come across are accessible. B, they've been cut off from their usual habitat and needed something to eat. Or C, you are literally living in their habitat. That last one is especially prevalent in situations where properties, often higher end ones, border wild spaces or regions that were once wild spaces. And I understand what the author means when needing to fence off the garden to keep animals out, as is described. However, if the same detail was taken in showing the garden's relationship to the surrounding ecosystem as was allotted to describing the children's actions, it could have been better. Furthermore, for a work that wants to be a picture book, it felt a bit more like an illustrated chapter book. Well, that is, again, not necessarily a bad thing. It was wordy and could likely have benefited from editing. And I genuinely wanted to like this more, but it felt like the story's flow kept getting disrupted. Even as an adult who was engaged in the subject matter, my attention wasn't entirely held. I can just imagine how it would have been for the intended child audience. As an aside, I'd not realized that the author was apparently famous in the house rehab slash fixer upper scene in Texas and on TV until I was looking it up, but that's an interesting point too. I don't know. Overall, I would give the illustrations 5 stars and the text itself 3 stars. So there we go. So we've got 3 stars for The Bad Seed and We Are the Gardeners, and 5 for A Seed is Sleeping. So that concludes today's video. There we go. Thank you very much for stopping by and hanging out. I look forward to seeing y'all here again. If this kind of thing is of interest, we do plant things. I'm going to try and have a new video up weekly, and we do 2 streams over on Twitch per week on Mondays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. PST, or GMT minus 8. Yeah, that's what it is. So right now I'm working through the Honey Bus and the Spoke the Plant. Reviews for both of those will be up on this channel eventually. And then we're going to be reading Braiding Sweetgrass over the next couple of weeks over on Twitch on Mondays, because Mondays are Botany Book Club days, and then Thursdays are general discussion times, and we're gonna keep doing that over there. So all the links and everything are in the description down below. Links to Instagram and Patreon and everything else. If you are either a Twitch subscriber or a patron on Patreon, you get content at least a day early before it goes live here. And yeah, there we go. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you might have learned something. And yeah, have a good rest of your day, everybody. See y'all later. Bye now.